So, hello, Derrick. How is it going? You just played a show here.
It's fantastic. It's been a long time since we've been in Finland. It's one of my favorite places to play. Love coming to Scandinavia. Just this part of the world is just very unique and very special. It has a strong place in the history of Sepultura, and it was really a wonderful show, perfect weather, and a very nice crowd that seemed very attentive. So it was shocking seeing a few different pits going on. I know that sometimes people can be, a little bit inside themselves at times here, depending on the show. But it was great to see a lot of people moving and having a good time, a lot of smiles on the faces.
So, today we're gonna talk a little bit about yourself and your journey as a metal vocalist. And the
Okay.
first question that I actually have is, do you remember when you heard heavy or rock or metal music for the first time in your life?
Yeah, I was definitely in elementary school. My parents, we moved to a neighborhood that was predominantly white because where I lived before was majority was black. So I wasn't really hearing any that style of music yet until we moved to this neighborhood. And I remember the neighbor that I had because I'm still friends with him to this day. And he got me into the Beatles. Like I was one of the first like rock groups I heard. And then from then on, going to school, there were kids in my elementary school that were playing drums and guitar at their house after school. And they were really into Iron Maiden and really into AC/DC. And it was the very beginning of when MTV just started. So all the rock videos started coming out and everyone wanted to imitate, these bands. And I remember specifically the drummer, his name, and I just remember thinking, you're going to be a really big drummer someday, like you're going to be famous. And I realized years later that he ended up playing with Jeff Buckley, and he played on that one album that is probably one of my top favorite albums ever put out.
Okay.
Matt Johnson. So I was really like blown away, and then got in contact with him, I think through like Facebook years ago. I was just like, do you remember me? Like, oh my God, I can't believe like from your basement and Cleveland. And now I was like, I realized that you were the drummer of, for Jeff Buckley. It's amazing. But yeah, those little details of hearing the Beatles and seeing music live with someone actually playing it in front of me was like really got me into heavy music, at least like rock music. And then once I started going to shows, the first shows I started going to were hardcore and punk shows.
Yeah, you started with
Yeah,
hardcore more.
absolutely.
So, were there like some specific like hardcore vocalists that you looked up to? And at what point did you sort of start to like switch from like singing to more like shouting slash screaming?
Well, I think there were like three integral vocalists that I really admired in the hardcore punk scene. HR from Bad Brains, Ian MacKaye, Minor Threat. I mean, those two, and also John Joseph from Chromax. They're all radically different people, but their attitude was something that was really impressive to me. And especially seeing HR live in Bad Brains is probably one of the best performances I've ever seen from a band in general. And then with Chromax, it was definitely the lyrical content I could really relate to, and they were talking about a lot of things that other bands weren't talking about. And that's something that drew me to hardcore and punk was the lyrical content and the diversity of people at shows. I thought it was interesting because a lot of people come from different backgrounds,
Definitely.
and relating to something and being very positive in a lot of ways, at least the scene that I was in and people that I was around. And it was just fascinating and a lot of fun to go to shows. So I got addicted to going to shows.
How was it in the early days when you started like screaming those songs and
hmm
shouting those songs? Where you first sort of tried to like mimic your idols and then figuring out your own way to do things? Were you like singing some specific songs, or how did that happen for you?
I think, with most bands, you start doing covers of certain bands that you admire.
Yeah.
And then I once I started singing in a band, I was emulating certain like hardcore bands that were more a little more melodical, like Dag Nasty, Descendants, stuff like that. I was really drawn to try to sing because I could sing. I had to study choir in school, and it was something that I didn't imagine myself doing. It was kind of like a class I got stuck with. And so once the teacher heard my voice, she told me like, hey, you have a baritone bass voice. That's rare. And also, especially at your age and just in general, it's just a rarity. You should really use your voice. And then I started to really take it seriously. I was already like 14, 13, and my mother was a music teacher. So for her, when I asked like, oh, should I take voice lessons? And she's like, absolutely. Like I'll pay for that, whatever you want to do, support that. And I started with that, but I really wanted to record a hardcore band, which I ended up doing with my friends, and it helped, taking those lessons and those vocal classes. But once I joined Sepultura and started singing with Sepultura, then it really took a turn to try to establish my voice in a way that I felt comfortable. And so I had a vocal coach. I learned a lot from that person to keep my voice on the road. And it was a process, because I had just met the guys, and they already had a lot of songs written on the first album. So it was the second time around, it was really trying to discover where I felt comfortable in my voice. And so the first two albums, I think it was spent on that. But once it was set, and after those two albums, and I had the confidence I felt, and I had the time to get to know those guys better, on the road, traveling, touring, writing an album from the very beginning, having that opportunity really got me comfortable to be in the band, because everything happened very fast at first. It was just a lot of things being thrown at me. And at the time, there was really not many people using the internet. So it wasn't anything I could look up and be like, oh, that's how big Sepultura were. It was like, no. I had to go to the library when I found out I got in the band. I had a library card then. I had to read about Brazil, like what is Brazil like? Like I don't know any people from there. I don't even know what language they're speaking. I thought they spoke Spanish. And it was just all these information. It was like nothing having to do with the internet. So it was very different, my perception of the band and being in the band. I had friends who really loved Sepultura, and they're like, oh, they're pretty big, but I didn't realize until actually going to Brazil, meeting them,
how big they are, like the national heroes of the country.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where everybody on the street like recognizing them and yelling from their car windows and stuff like that. So that was, it took some time to get into. It was like every day, like learning something new, but it was exciting for me because I always wanted to be with musicians that were very serious and take it to a higher level.
Were you losing your voice in the early days when you tried to mimic your like influences, and did it take like long time to figure out the right technique for the screaming and growling so that you don't lose your voice?
I caught on pretty quickly. Fortunately, especially before going in the studio, that was the idea of having that coach so I wouldn't lose my voice. And then I found, my spot, and having really good producers also helped, because they would give very good suggestions on trying to find my range and not blowing out my voice.
Yeah.
So honestly, I never had that problem of losing my voice. I was always very careful of that, especially on tour. Doing warm-ups and warming down after a show, and just not going so crazy as far as, I don't smoke cigarettes or anything like that. So, and not talking a lot after a show, and just really taking care of it. Not using any type of sprays or anything like that where you become very addicted to it. It's like, oh, if I don't have it, I can't go on. I learned early on that those are horrible. And especially if you have a serious problem with your throat, you're not going to know if you keep numbing it, And so I learned a lot of really good tips from the very beginning, and was very serious about my voice, especially doing warm-ups and warm down even after a show. And I think that's helped the longevity of my voice and being able to be in this band and never having to cancel a show because of that.
So when you hopped into Sepultura, obviously, like you already mentioned, it's a big machine. So
Yes.
and you hopped into like tours, playing shows after shows after shows. So what kind of memories do you have when it comes to the first tour? Were you ready as a vocalist to do like show after show, or was it difficult and a big learning experience for you?
It was extremely difficult and challenging, but I needed that. And it's something that I really wanted to do. And I was, because it was something I dreamt of doing. So it was great to be in that position to actually make it happen. Having the opportunity to be there meant a lot. So I took it very seriously. And it was extremely difficult, a lot more than I imagined. They have such a strong fan base, Sepultura, and especially at that time of Roots exploding and then everything just blowing up after that with those guys, as far as like all the drama of vocalists leaving and the band continuing onward. So it it was something that I knew would take time in order for people to understand the change in the band. Because I know when a band changes, a lot of people get very sour and like, oh God, this is my band. This is something that I love. I don't want to see them change.
Metal people are quite diehard.
Metal people.
Yep.
And that's, I mean, you said it and I know it. There's a lot of gatekeepers, people are just like really protecting it as far as of not wanting to let go of the past and things. But that's not life, that's not reality.
No.
Everything around us is changing,
For sure.
evolving. And the best things are usually evolving, especially as an artist. It's about evolving. It's not about just staying the same. It's about discovery. It's about communicating. And it's just a natural process of life, and most bands are usually changing. There's very few bands have kept the exact original members from the very beginning.
Yep.
There's only like a handful. But those changes are just something that are very natural that happen, especially as an artist, as a musician. It's very difficult to keep that unit together. But, that desire and drive, it's a combination of many things that need to come together to keep it going. But as an artist, I knew that it would take time for it to really grow and for us to develop, something stronger. And that takes touring, traveling on the road, recording. As we move forward, I felt that it was getting better and better. And again, I was becoming more confident in what I was doing, especially playing live is the best, like, way of going about it. You learn so fast on stage, and we were doing a lot of tours and traveling a lot of different places. So this helped. And also being around very positive people. You have to be open to take criticism very well. And that's something a lot of artists have a hard time doing. But for me, I'm very open, and if people are coming to me in a way that's respectful and they want to see the best, then I can take that criticism easily to be a part of a group to make everything better. And so that was something that connected very well with me and the other guys in the band. And it was a very positive group of people surrounding us as producers and friends, and keeping that circle tight really led to us to keep going.
So do you have a specific warm-up routine that you follow, and has that changed through the years, or has it remained the same?
It's pretty much been the same, doing a lot of scales in the very beginning, of just and doing a lot of tongue rolling and just massaging the vocal cords in that way. It's usually 30 minutes to an hour before the show. I definitely am not drinking. I don't eat honey or anything like that. I know a lot of people like that with tea and things like that, but I prefer just room temperature water or tea with no sugar, no honey. It's very, you develop a lot of phlegm from the sugar and everything. So for me, I just like to do that routine and to work out before a little bit in the day before a show. A lot of stretching, a lot of stretching, especially after a show. and just physically tried to be in shape. I mean, it's for me watching these bands back in the day that had so much energy and they kept themselves in shape. And I was really into sports growing up in high school. And I just thought it was really admirable, you know, that they took their profession so seriously as physically to be in shape, as well as mentally. And I felt that was always important to try to keep um, that energy for a show live. I want to be the best I can during a show, and that means maintaining, you know, a healthy body and mind.
So obviously you've released during your career a lot of albums with Sepultura. Are there like some specific albums that you could pinpoint where you have felt that you've taken big step forward as a vocalist, learned something new about yourself, for example?
That's a good question. I think every album I'm learning something new because you're usually working with producers that we're fortunate to work with producers that bring out a lot in yourselves. You know, I think that's a number one goal of a producer is to really to have that ability to bring something out that you never imagined. We worked on the last two albums with Sepultura with Jens Bogren, and he lives in Sweden. He's Swedish. I had heard about his work through Opeth, like I'm a big fan, and other stuff they had done, and I was always like, who is producing this? What's going on here? I think we need to work with them. And we contacted him and ended up recording the last two albums in Sweden. And it was an unbelievable experience, I think, for all of us. Jens really became like a member of the band in a way. His work ethics are so strong and his ability to hear, you know, the artists and to elaborate on top of that it's incredible. So he brought out a lot of things that pushing me, especially vocally, singing, doing things as harmonies, having ideas with like choir. It just was super challenging. Then I never imagined myself being able to create like a basic chorus line for a choir, you know, and that was something that we did on the last album where we ended up taking that idea that I did in the studio and to an actual church with, you know, people singing and like, hey, you guys are going to sing like this and this it's going to, you know, work really well on an album for Sepultura. And we're able to do that. And that was something I never imagined. Also doing a song in Japanese where it was just like a bonus track and having to sing in Japanese and having like a Japanese exchange student come in and help vocally do that. And that was super challenging. And I never imagined doing that in a recording session. But that was something that was very special that I remember from the last recordings.
But of course, you are always up for challenges.
Yes, absolutely. You know, that's like the goal of being an artist, I think, is pushing yourself to do those challenging things.
I have two questions left, and the second
Okay.
last one actually goes that what were your parents' reactions when they heard
Hmm.
you screaming your lungs out for the first time? Were they always like supportive for you or?
I think they were always supportive because as much as they might not have understood what we're doing and screaming in the loud music, but it was done in my parents' house in the basement. And so they kind of knew where I was. It was doing something that was very positive. And again, my mother being a music teacher understood that the importance of being able to establish a personality through music. And it was just something that not a lot of kids, I think, were doing, but it was something that was very special to us and brought us a lot of happiness. So they didn't really mind that. And they actually got to see, you know, a few shows, which was shocking to them, but they liked the fact that people were into what we were doing and at least what I was doing as well. And it was just something very special, but very open-minded. And that was something that it's was super important. I think in all of our lives, everyone in the band, we had very supportive parents.
Last question,
Hmm.
and I guess this is something that has been asked from you, from different vocalists, most likely many times, but any kind of advice that you would like to give to a young metal vocalist who is just about to start their own journey?
Hmm. Well, definitely find your voice. Don't be afraid to try different things. Be comfortable in your voice. Don't abuse your voice as far as a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs. Any of those things are just going to make everything 100 times harder, and you're not going to be able to endure that for a long period of time. So if you want to be in the game for a long time, you want to be able to perform and do the best that you do, then it's better without any of that, and to stay focused on that path of trying to find who it is yourself, within yourself, find yourself, and to be able to express that in a way that people can understand it. But yeah, it takes a lot of challenging situations, and again, the criticism, be able to take positive criticism and go with it, and definitely forget the negative criticism, because there's always going to be people that are there trying to put you down or don't understand what you're doing. But it's important to ignore, all that negativity. It's easy to ignore it, because it's not helpful in any way, but always stay focused and positive.
Thanks a lot for doing
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Thank you.